It's now time for our first panel discussion of the day, and quite appropriately, it's titled How Blockchain is Transforming the Future of Financial Services Infrastructure. Before I tell you more about that panel discussion, a quick note for those of you traveling to the airport at some point today, please go to the travel desk at the lobby level and speak to our coordinators. They will help you get from the hotel to the airport. Coming back to the panel, I'd like to invite, I'd like to invite our speakers first. Mr. Sudhin Baraukar, Head of Innovation, State Bank of India. Can we have you on stage? Mr. Vinay Agarwal, Chief Executive Officer, Angel Broking. I hope I'm able to pronounce the next name correctly. Mr. Paul Warunthon Kittiwong Sungthon, better known as Mr. Paul Kitty. Mr. Paul Kitty, co-founder and COO of OnePay. Mr. Akshay Dhanak, Vice President of HDFC Life. And Mr. Hitesh Sarda, Director, BSF Solutions Value Labs. Thank you, gentlemen. Our moderator for this session will be Ms. Rachna Nath, Partner and Head Digital Consulting at KPMG. Ms. Nath, can I request you to take the center seat? Thank you, Ms. Nath. You have the next 35 minutes to bring opinions from this panel on blockchain.
I thought I had 3. So thank you so much. Thanks for having us here, and thanks for having such an exemplary panelist and making me part of that. I think what I'm very, very intrigued by this technology itself, and frankly, we knew Bitcoin before we knew possibly blockchain. And Bitcoin and blockchain became very real for me when I was last year in Prague and I saw an ATM which actually dispenses Bitcoin. And I said, oh God, I mean, while we are just talking about Bitcoin being something which is so surreal, it's actually so real that you even have a ATM which dispenses it. So let me just start off with a little bit of a philosophy of why, something like this came into picture, and we all know what happened in 2008. And a lot of us who come with the technology background know what open systems, and systems did to technology over the last few years. And the concept of blockchain possibly came from being, free from intermediaries. That, the banks haven't done, and my apologies to all the financial institutions out here, haven't done a great job of actually, securing my money. So why can't I actually, do away with the intermediaries and make sure that I'm transacting on a peer-to-peer basis with somebody who I really need to actually transact with. And that is where the fascination lies, because the biggest adoption of blockchain has actually been in the area of actually driven by the banks and the insurance companies out here. So, you might actually be talking about an institution which is killing its own model to be able to reinvent itself, possibly in the future. So it's actually very intriguing, whenever I talk about something, I think about something like it, because we as consultants and, companies who have been there for hundreds of years try to kill our own model to be able to create new ones, and we haven't even tried to be able to understand what something like a RPA and cognitive can do to our own business, like, an assurance and a tax. And I often say that the day that somebody actually, whatever is repeatable gets into cognitive out here, 80% of our business gets wiped out. So, it's really heartening to see, what the financial institutions are actually doing to be able to create that adoption. But what I'll do is, and we have a very interesting panel, 3 people, one from capital market, one from the bank, and the other from insurance, and 3 of us who are largely part of the entire ecosystem. I'll probably start with you, Hitesh. And Hitesh, tell us a bit about what you do. What's very interesting for me, frankly, is the adoption piece that you're talking about. So while we are talking about blockchain, how is it getting adopted into the ecosystem is very interesting.
Thanks, Rachna. You're right about the adoption piece. So we live in pretty interesting times. We have seen 3 major technology disruptions. We've seen the internet, which brought in connectivity and things that, like a check deposit used to take 4 days, 5 days to clear, and now we can transfer money in minutes, if not hours. Then we saw the convenience piece coming on the mobile, and instead of going to the bank can come to me, open an account in half an hour, which was unthinkable. And now we are at blockchain, and we want to see what this trust that blockchain can bring, how can that disrupt the industry, whether it is disintermediation, which you touched upon, or whether it is just data, trustful data flowing in, and the immediate immediate adoption is around settlements and reconciliation and clearing, and these industries would get changed, and people who don't reinvent the model from the IT services side. So a lot of us are into reconciliation business, and thousands of people are employed in that. We need to reinvent ourselves. So it is interesting times, and there are immediate adoption, and there are POCs getting done, and people trying to understand where it can get employed.
Sure. So I'll possibly move to the industry, and Sudhin, the question is to you. I've really watched SBI reinvent itself, if I was to say this, and get very, very aggressive on innovation, right? And take up very, very new concepts, implement them, and we've been lucky to be part of it. Tell us a bit about, what's happening at SBI, how you are driving the blockchain agenda specifically.
So at State Bank of India, we're very involved in and focused on innovation. We see emerging tech as a big opportunity because that's where the banking is going. Everything is going to be technology-based. We feel that the way to approach emerging tech, especially fintech and blockchain, is to collaborate with banks, put up a forum. And we just did that. We have launched with a startup called PrimeChain. We've launched the Bank Chain Forum. It's about 10 banks who are there. More are likely to join. It's a mix of PSU and private banks and all other banks. The reason we're doing is that with this collaboration, with the sharing of knowledge, and we're trying to get this outcome-based. One of the problems that we face on emerging tech and especially on innovation, that at some stage we're going to be challenged as to what is the outcome, right? We spent money on POCs, pilots, events, a whole lot of other stuff, and we're going to be challenged. So one of the best ways to de-risk this is to actually form a forum of banks and try to focus on some of the use cases which will get us that outcome. Also try to work on the IP side, kind of create some standards or some protocols and take this particular blockchain to the next level. So just like databases, which were started in the 60s and 70s, the databases became warehouses. The warehouses became then big data, and our big data, now that we are talking about data lake and all other emerging tech. The same we see blockchain also progressing, not just as a distributed ledger technology, but once it starts integrating, and this is my technical view, once it starts integrating with the messaging systems, with the ODBCs, with other kind of protocols, I think it's going to present a lot of benefits from a technology standpoint of view. So we in fact, just yesterday, we had a small meeting, brief meeting with the Andhra AP government officials. And it's not just that we are building an ecosystem for banks and collaborating with banks, we're also collaborating with governments and see how we can, and our partners, including KPMG, and we are seeing how this collaborative way forward can take us to the next level.
I think interesting, when you talk about collaboration, we've hardly seen, banks and financial institutions collaborate amongst themselves, but we'll come to that in a bit. Before that, Akshay, how real is blockchain for insurance?
Well, traditionally, life insurance has been considered as laggard in terms of embracing any leading or bleeding edge technologies. But blockchain is changing that perspective. And back in November 2016, few of the life insurers, including HDFC Life, came together to explore the potential that blockchain carries. Now, blockchain is a fantastic step in terms of the tech advancement, where the erstwhile or traditional competitors are coming together and talking about what merit this technology can bring in addressing three critical areas of sensitivities, which are also in line with the agenda of the regulator. And this is an unusual constellation which has happened only because of the merits of blockchain technology. First and foremost is the customer focus. This is an area where regulator is also very sensitive. Whatever we do, whether it is in terms of our product design or service delivery, the customer interests have to be kept paramount. The second part is healthy growth of the industry. The private sector, the private life insurance are quite few right now. The market is again ripe for more players to come in. But having said this, we want to make sure that as the industry is growing, the trust that the customer lays in each of us is kept paramount. The third is more managed on the individual basis in terms of looking at our operating margins and trying to see if there are certain common back office processes where each of the life insurer has got cost component which is significant enough to warrant a collaboration. Now, with these three sensitivities kept on table, in the second session itself of our consortium meet, we identified very critical use cases. It was very interesting to see how this entire technology can help us collaborate in an environment that was not necessarily having so much of trust before. We can share data securely. We can build a set of rules which can be agreed upon as a consortium. This discussion would have been very relevant even a few years back. And don't get me wrong, there were traditional technologies that could also cater to solving this problem. But in terms of driving the efficiency, in rolling out those capabilities that are built on top of the principles of collaboration, we see blockchain is going to provide the necessary thrust, the necessary acceleration. We used to rely on certain intermediaries in terms of exchanging the data. And as you can imagine or visualize, even doing a one-on-one contract and getting other peers in the industry to participate and agree on the terms and conditions with that intermediary would itself derail some of the critical initiatives. The other interesting aspect is that it provides an opt-in approach. So much as we have formed the consortium, we clearly see that we will go in a direction where we might identify quite a number of use cases. And I was very excited when I heard Mr. Chaudhary talk about creating a use case repository over here. Now, once we come out with those use cases, we would want to analyze them. We would want to evaluate the business merits of them. And as Sudhin very aptly pointed out, unless there is an outcome, there's not going to be much focus, there's not going to be much drive, there's not going to be much enthusiasm. But net-net, I definitely see blockchain is going to help us improve as an industry. It is going to bring together the peers in the industry to do that which is right in the interest of the customer, the citizen of our country. And that's where we all are headed as consumers.